Hi folks, In Our Words is just about to get started at Magnolia Avenue. I've stepped out of the hall to introduce this. I don't like to disturb the folks who are in the auditorium. So what I'm about to do is to put this on the tripod and we'll just let it run until the speakers are ready to speak. Sit tight and we'll be back in a moment.
Eugene, her dad.
Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome you today to the 5th installment of our In Our Words Student Speaker Series. My name is Dr. Judy Sigler. I'm an anthropology professor at Pellissippi State, and I am also co-advisor for Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. First, I'd like to start off with some thank yous. First, to Dean Tillman for hosting us here at the Magnolia campus and all of the other Magnolia family we have here. I'd also like to thank Phi Theta Kappa members Evan Warren and Sandy Davis, who will be introducing our speakers. And I'd like to give you a little bit of history, I guess, about this speaker series. Several faculty in the speech communications department, Dr. Angel Hughes, Mr. Don King, felt that it was necessary that our students have a voice in terms of their experience, in terms of their experience here in the college, experience in their lives. And so this idea of a student speaker series was born. Phi Theta Kappa's role in this is to provide manpower, woman power to help host this event, as well as support in terms of finding these wonderful students to share their story. We are now in our 3rd year of this speaker series. We do one a semester, so we are getting ready to start over in the spring back at Blount County. But again, just one of the things that we hope in terms of students sharing their stories, and those of you hearing these stories, that you will also be up here one day sharing your story in your words. I'd like to turn it over now to Moira Connolly, who will tell us a little bit about the topic for today's speeches.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Magnolia Avenue. Thank you for coming out. This topic has to do with families and literacy in families. And as a college, we so focus on education, but we know that none of our students do it alone, right? That a lot of times you're supported in your education by your family, and that the way you look at education is very much impacted by the influence of your family. So this speaker series topic is called In Our Own Words, and it's partly about the literacy stories of our students as it relates to their families. How do they come to be readers and writers? What part did they play? What part did their families play? And each student was able to tell us part of his or her story in terms of becoming a reader and writer and ultimately a student, based a little bit by considering their family history. So that's kind of where this topic for today's session came from.
Hello. Alright, I'm Evan Warren. That's the following. Okay, so first up today we have Alyssa Molina. Alyssa Molina is a slam poet with the 5th Woman cohort and has just recently began writing professionally. Alyssa is deeply impacted by spirituality, growing up, and the pains that come with it, the suffering that depression causes, and the triumph of the human spirit. Alyssa was born and raised in Miami, Florida, Little Havana, as her Cuban parents always says. Being first-generation American, Alyssa is profoundly inspired from the tenacity of her parents' immigration story, their will to survive, and her Hispanic culture. Alyssa is proud and loud, with a booming voice and a laugh that is often heard before she is seen. And if Alyssa isn't laughing, she's probably trying to make others laugh with wild and elaborate stories. Alyssa is currently pursuing an English and history double major with a focus on creative writing. She knows she's crazy for doing this. Alyssa loves to talk about Game of Thrones, politics, the heart, and the writing process, with a little salsa dancing on the side. So Alyssa, would you like to come up?
Hi,
just first and foremost, do we have any other Latin people in the room today? No? Okay, that's fine. Just about us. So, all across the Latin and Spanish-speaking board, a lot of words mean a lot of different things to everybody. But however, there's one word in specific that I know just sends shivers down Latin spines. Every child knows the word, the fear behind it, the fear of God. It is chancleta or chancla. So simply that just means like a house shoe or a slipper. And it is every Latin mother or grandmother's weapon of choice in disciplinary choices, weapon choices. And their aim when they just hurl the shoe is so perfect every time that if the Vols want to see a win in their future, they should just start drafting mamas and mamas, right? Okay. So all jokes aside, there is one word that I know is very special to my family specifically and to a lot of Latin families, and it's libre, which means freedom. So my American birth is the fulfillment of a secret dream that was born in what could hardly be called a home. It was born in Havana, Cuba, with a roof caving over, just a one-bedroom home that my mother, her 5 elder siblings, and my grandparents shared. My mother grew up illiterate, desolate, she was starving. The highest education level for my family could be the equivalent of the third grade reading level. And I'm here now as an English major and a writer, which is really important for my story. And they prayed every night, tightly clasping each other's hands to Lady Liberty for a miracle. And at the time, I had an aunt living in Miami, Florida, and she was working as many jobs as she was able. Nothing was beneath her. There was no job too good or too dirty for her. She was hustling like she invented the word, just so she could save enough money for green cards. And for some miracle, my mother's miracle came. She got her entry into the United States. And when this aunt passed away, years and years later, 50 people had to thank her for their grant into the United States. 50 people thanked her for their green cards. I never met her, and I thank her for my opportunity to be born in the United States, to be able to be standing on this stage. However, where my mother's miracle came, my father's did not. So molina is derived from the Spanish word molear, which means to grill, to mill or process grain. So molina is the last name of a farmer. And in medieval Spain, your last name was your profession. So people who milled or processed grain were molineros. But specifically for my family, molinero was the last name of a slave. They were Moors, they were Arabic slaves. So when they were granted immigration to Cuba, they changed the molinero name to molina. So farming is all my family has ever known. But can you imagine being born into a life where you do not know freedom? And I know I can't, but I easily could have. So the food that my family farmed for, they were not privy to. But there was a nation that promised freedom for all. So for a people whose freedom had been stolen for them, this was something they were desperate for. And their miracle never came. They had to build it with their bare hands. They tied together rafts, built of trees, and sailed away into the night. This swim from Havana, Cuba to Key West, Florida should have killed them. It killed millions. But for some miracle, they got to touch American soil. As illegal as it was, they kissed American soil, cried, soy libre, soy libre. For the first time in their lives, they got to say that they were free. They were free. And I have everything for that story. I am so thankful that their pain of being slaves and being oppressed exceeded the pain of not knowing freedom, that they decided to make the swim, because now I get to have an education because of them. And it's hard because I know sea waves for what they are. I know them to be graveyards. They are the graveyards for millions of people that history will always forget to remember. They were the people with the wrong skin color in a country that they thought would free them. They're still free, but they did have the wrong skin color for a lot of years. But I know that those sea waves, for me, I will always think of reggaeton. I will see them for rolled R's, for the smoke of cigars. I know sea waves as my origin story. I'm thankful for sea waves and that there are a lot of people that died making those swim, but for some miracle, my family survived that swim. They should not have, it should have killed them. And they were all illiterate, they still are to this day. But I'm not, because of their sacrifice and because of their tenacious spirit. I don't know what kind of person I would be living in Cuba. I have ideas, but I know the kind of person I am today. I know the kind of person I hope to be. And I know that regardless, I have made my family proud because I'm standing here today sharing their story. And a lot of times they feel like they themselves can't share it, but I shared it for them on their behalf. So thank you for listening and for letting me share it with you guys.
Hello everyone, my name is Sandra Davis, and our next special speaker is Bonnie Hammett. Bonnie is an adult learner, and she's working towards reinventing herself. Currently, she is a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker, mother of 2 darling girls. She started this educational journey with a focus on studies in religion and psychology, working on her 4 general education courses here at Pellissippi State with the goal to continue her education as she transfers on to the University of Tennessee. Please welcome Bonnie Hammett.
Thank you, and thank you for your words. This is an honor to be here, and a thank you to the staff, the faculty, and the students for this opportunity to speak. So to prepare for this speech, I sought out some wisdom. The wisdom I sought was from my 8 and 11-year-old daughters. They had many questions about this speech, one of which was, would I mention them? So there I have. They suggested to me to share my story just as that, as a story as I would share as a teacher. So here goes my story to struggle with spelling. Mom, I need some help. I don't understand my homework. How do you spell? I would ask my mother this time and time again. I always got the same response from her. I'm not doing your homework for you. Go figure it out. I would go and I would try to find the words and the answers to my questions on my own. I struggled to find them. I searched the dictionaries, textbooks, and yes, even the encyclopedias. Without any luck, I would return to my mother for assistance. I would say again, Mom, can you please help me? I need some help. I can't find the word. Well, she would say to me the exact same things, except with a little bit more frustration towards me. Go figure it out. At some points, I would stop. I would be discouraged, but many times this wasn't the case. I did desire to be successful in school, so I had to teach myself. Many times it was difficult for me to figure out what a letter of a word would start with. So I would look through the textbooks to see if I could see it on the pages, and then I'd be able to transfer it appropriately into my work. I was developing my visual learning skills without even knowing it at the time. So if you could see here on the page, which you cannot, so I'll explain to you an example of how I misspelled. So I learned to break words down and sound them out, becoming a self-taught phonetic learner. Phonetic, F-U-N-E-T-I-C. Well, no, I know visually that doesn't look correct, so I know also the PH sound, so I'll put that in, right? Okay, so P-H-O-N-I-C-E, because it looks correct, right? What the heck? No, not correct. Anyhow, so I couldn't spell, and the feeling of self-worth would decline. The struggle to spell was real. I wasn't as good as you to remember everything, so I am going to continue. I was so proud. I was so impressed. I have to sidestep. I really was. I was so impressed with it. So anyhow, as a child, I did not understand the dynamics of our family situation as I do now. We moved into our first home when I was 5. My mom's highest level of education was a vocational high school diploma. She was also a stay-at-home mom of 5 children, on the second in line. The 3 younger than me at the time of the story were all under the age of 3. As we grew up, she took on some part-time shifts, evening third shifts mostly, so she wasn't there to help me with my homework. And then I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, who were even less there for me with my homework. In fact, I don't even recall them ever helping us with our homework. I was on my own there too. When my mom was home, she was often angry and frustrated most of the time. And now as an adult, I do understand that the responsibility of raising 5 children with a lack of education must have been tough. The setting for getting homework done was around the kitchen table with all 5 siblings while my mom cooked dinner and cared for the younger children. I would try and stay focused while my brothers teased and taunted me. She was still unavailable for any help. By the time, this is so hard to share, sorry. By the time I reached high school, I learned not to ask for help. So, this is me being real, if you don't mind to excuse that. Then, a shift happened that did change my life forever. You ready for this? Spell check on the computer. So with this new tool, I was able to have access to help. It didn't matter what the word was, what the project was. I would pull up that word processor and type the words in, so I could find and see how to spell to get my work done correctly. The difficulty, though, was that I couldn't carry what I now call a dinosaur computer around with me. So I was limited in my help when I was home on that desktop computer. Otherwise, I continued to struggle. If the spell check was not available, I would begin to guess at the words. If I got stumped, then I would pick another word with similar meaning until I found a way to get across what I was attempting to say with the words I didn't know how to spell. Spell check was also hard for me to keep up with, so the many words that, okay, this is not my specialty, guys, I'm sorry. So there were many words that I thought were correct. So there were no red lines on the computer, right? So the computer did not recognize them as being incorrect because they were real words. So they were just not the words I had in mind. The word processor was not intelligent enough to point out the incorrect words. For example, fool for fool would not be identified as misspelled. Using spell check was my plan. However, this plan was not foolproof. I came to rely on what words looked visually and how they sounded phonetically. I feared the reader's judgments, and apparently your all's too, of how perhaps I might not have the information correct just because I misspelled a word. This has lowered my sense of confidence. However, as an adult, I'm working towards and realizing that my misspelled words might simply come across to the reader as a lack of proofreading, and this gives me a new challenge to face. The evolution of technology has continued to bless me, and still is one of the biggest techniques I use. When I got my first smartphone, I had no idea how I would come to rely on it. I would keep it handy in my back pocket for any spelling news that I came across daily. Now this technology and this device was so cool that I was able to speak into it and not only get the correct word spelled, but not only get the spelling correct, but it's the actual word that I said. So I was so excited when this technology came about. If the modern technologies that we have now were available to me then, I might be a different person. Despite all of this, I am grateful for the journey. It makes me who I am today, with strong survival skills. I know I can find a way through whatever comes along. I can figure out difficult tasks and the struggles I face. Over the span of my life, these self-learned, self-taught survival skills to spell have been my saving graces. I continue to improve slowly with the process. The desire and the importance of learning have never changed or slowed down for me. It's a valuable lesson. As I continue to reflect, as an adult learner, I learned to utilize the resources available to me here. I now know that I'm taking on this growth in these gains, working to apply them with confidence as I continue my education. It is yet to be seen how the struggles with spelling will affect me in college. but I am sure I will attempt to approach each struggle as an opportunity to grow and to learn, increasing my vocabulary and spelling one word at a time. My journey of learning to spell might very well take a lifetime to learn, and I'm okay with that. I've learned to embrace the spelling setback and a different perspective as an adult. It's no longer a setback, but an opportunity to continue to grow. The principal lessons I have learned in this process of spelling is to accept myself for who I am, as I am, and to value myself, not based on how well I can spell, but based on how well I can treat myself despite it.
Y'all know that y'all are a motivation and inspiration, and so far I've lived your all's life, and we all have a story to tell. Our next guest speaker today is Erin Canfield. Erin is a full-time student here at Pellissippi who plans to further her educational goals at UTK after she graduates Pellissippi. She is the only girl out of 6 children. She spent the majority of her childhood here in Tennessee, and she loves to travel. You ought to take a Tennessee trip. She is a very close, she's very close to her family, and in her spare time, she enjoys genealogy and doing family history work. Let us welcome Erin Canfield.
So, as was said earlier, I was born the first daughter in a family of 7 children. The reason it's 6 now is when I was 4 years old, my little sister Georgia Ann died. My parents knew from the beginning that she would be born having only a few hours to live on this earth, and during a time that most families would be planning a bride baby shower, mine was planning a funeral. Georgia Ann passed away just 3 hours after she was delivered. We were fortunate enough to have a doctor that understood that during this time, we would want to spend as much time together as a family with minimal interruptions. The time we were able to spend together was sweet, but it was short and unforgettable, or so I thought. I learned the importance of journal writing at a very young age. Having been born and raised in the LDS faith, I was taught the importance of genealogy and family history, and how that affected my testimony and my personal faith. Because of diligent journaling through my ancestors' event, I know the triumphs and the struggles of my great-grandmother's life. I know the hardships that my grandmother experienced in raising 7 children almost single-handedly. And I also learned of my 5th great-grandfather's journey across the early American continent as a pioneer because of his dedication to his faith. Through documenting their own personal journey through this life, my ancestors have helped their posterity understand the tribulations they went through. In turn, my family has grown in the face of adversity and received strength and guidance from reading through our family history. These accounts and trials have shaped the way my family lives and is what makes us unique. All of my ancestors have records, and because of that, I know my roots, the very core of who I am. My ancestors tasked themselves with journal keeping as a way to benefit their posterity. However, I saw it as just that, a task. So throughout most of middle school and high school, every few months, I'd get really motivated with the help of my family and my church leaders, and I'd write, 1 or 2 paragraphs in a hurry or 1 or 2 journal entries. But I never really put much thought into it, and no matter how hard I tried, it kind of died away after a week or 2, and my journal was once again left to collect dust. There was maybe a handful of times I can remember that I really put a lot of effort into my journal writing, and those were really spiritual experiences for me, like church camp or my baptism or the baptism of my brothers. But as I said earlier, life goes on, and I got really busy, and I got distracted, and my journal was not thought of again. And at times, I was really disappointed with myself that I wasn't able, despite my best efforts, to consistently write in my journal. However, my thinking completely changed one afternoon when my mother sat me down in the living room to talk to me. My mother has always been a really great example to me of journal writing. She writes anything and everything she thinks is significant or important in her journal. And when she sat down to talk to me, she pulled out her journal. I kind of instantly rolled my eyes and thought, oh my gosh, not this again. She's going to lecture me about how I need to keep a journal. But this time it was way different. She didn't chastise me for neglecting my journal. Instead, she asked me the question, what can you tell me about Georgia Ann? I kind of sat stunned, and I slowly began to tell her what little I remembered or what I had been told. And after I was done, she opened her journal to an entry over 14 years ago, just weeks after Georgia Ann died. She began to read, and she told me about how she had fiery wisps of little red hair and gorgeous blue eyes. And she told me that even though I didn't fully understand what was going on, I was so sweet to her, and I held her and I whispered things into her ear. She told me about the funeral and how it was quiet and sacred. And she told me about how I looked into the casket and thought Jan was just so gorgeous and pretty, and how I noticed that they had put makeup on her. At this point in the conversation, I realized I was crying. I had forgotten almost all of these details, and they meant the world to me. I explained this to her, and she quietly agreed. She told me that without her journal, all of these memories of Georgia Ann would have been forgotten, and the small details would have faded from my memory. My mother quietly finished the conversation and told me to think on it. With that, she left, and with her, the way I view journal writing changed. From that day on, I started writing anything I believed to be significant in my journal. I even wrote all my mother had told me about Georgia Ann. I made it a challenge to find 1 or 2 good things a day that impacted me for the better, and every couple of days I would take the time to sit down and write these things down in my journal. Since then, I have been able to look back on these entries and ponder about the blessings God has given me and how much I've grown. I never thought I could ever make journal writing that simple, but it is. It's not some complicated process that will only benefit my posterity. Journal writing is something that benefits me now, a few months from now, and even years from now. Thanks to my mom's example, I'm able to look back and ponder on life events like Georgia Ann, my first job, and when my younger brothers are born. All things I do not want to overlook. I'm forgetful, but now I know that when I journal, it doesn't matter that I forget things because the important events will always be written down on paper.
Thank you for that. Alright, so last but not least, we have Diangela Moore. Diangela returned to Pellissippi State to finish her college education to get a degree to allow her to get her dream job. She plans to become a medical office administrator. So please join me in welcoming Diangela.
Thank you. As a child, I do not remember being read to or books being brought into my home. I would look at pictures in magazines and newspaper articles. What helped me to read was the skill of sounding out words to correctly pronounce them, and I became really good at that skill. As I prepared for junior high school, I found myself frustrated with reading, and I grew not to like it. But I knew it was something that I would have to do for the rest of my life. In the 5th grade, I remember joining a Bible study group. The Bible study leader would read Bible verses aloud, and the class would have to follow along. The Bible is a very complicated written book because it was written many years ago. I felt like the Bible study class helped me with understanding that different words can mean the same thing depending on how they're used in a sentence. Reading the Bible affected my life positively because it expanded my vocabulary, and I began using words I remembered from the Bible verses in my everyday life. I grew surprised when I knew that I liked writing more than I did reading, since the two skills related so much to each other. I would always get complimented by students and teachers about how good my handwriting was, but not one compliment on how I read. In high school, I began to realize that maybe I didn't like to read because I was always looking through the views of someone else and not my own. My reading abilities have really picked up since I started college. I'm currently taking an academic and personal readings class, and in this course, we previously read a book called The White Castle. I have learned how to monitor my comprehension, make connection to the text, and react emotionally to the text when reading. I can now comprehend what I read and convey that on paper. I have learned a lot of reading strategies that has helped me become a better reader. Returning to school and furthering my education has been all about my children. I would read to my daughter all the time before she could talk, and I believe that has helped her tremendously. She's 6 and is reading on a third grade level, and now she calls me her hero when I read to her, now that she can talk. Reading is not just for me about pronouncing words correctly, but applying deep thinking and being able to obtain key information about what you read. Reading was a real struggle, but I now know what being a great reader requires. And as a mom, my main goal is to make sure my children know that as well. That's all I have.
Let's give our speakers a round of applause. Thank you so much for hosting us at Magnolia Avenue. It's been a great experience for us here at Magnolia Avenue campus. Thank you so much for hosting us. Thank you to the speakers. You all are just incredible stories. I mean, you have overcome so many obstacles. And that's why we're here at Pellissippi, to support students like you. All right? So I want to thank everyone for attending here. And I hope that the rest of you have a great rest of the semester, okay? Thank you.
So that wraps up another In Our Words. Wow, what an impact these speakers had sharing their stories. This is going to stay on our page. In fact, we'll probably do a cleaned up version of it, get the sound a little better. But I hope that folks can use this video to teach something to their own students. Join us in the spring for the next In Our Words.